If you're a sports fan, make sure you go check out SportsCastr for all of your sports news. Whether you are a Patriots fan or not, this is the perfect way to meet all of your sports needs and is a platform I personally use myself in case any of you guys want to catch me live talking about training camp recaps, etc. I'll leave a link in the description below.
What is up, Pats Nation? It's Patriots Global back here with another video, and in this one, I'm going to be going over all the transactions that the Patriots have made in order to get the team down to 53 players for the start of the regular season. This will be including guys put on the injured reserve. This will include guys that were released and guys that were traded. Following this video, I will have another video up, which is going to be all about the players that made the 53-man roster. And really, I'm just making it into two separate videos, so you're not watching just one super long video that's kind of confusing. It kind of just helps organize the entire thing. Now, the Patriots definitely have made some surprising moves, so you're going to want to watch the entire thing through. I'm going to name, again, every transaction and put my kind of thoughts, if there are any thoughts, for each individual guy. So the Patriots actually started off releasing guys before a lot of other teams did, and this is going to be some news that you guys have already heard, but stay with me because technically these are still moves that they did in order to get down to 53 players. So it kind of started off with D'Angelo Ross. The rookie got put on the injured reserve, which freed up a spot. Then they released Danny Etling. He then signed with the Falcons. We then released Dontrelle, Inman, and punter Ryan Allen. Then linebacker Brandon King, he gets injured, so he then also gets put on the injured reserve, which frees up a spot. New England then releases defensive end Keion Crossen, wide receiver Maurice Harris, running back Robert Martin, who only had a day with the team, and veteran defensive lineman Mike Pennell. Then we get to a trade, and this is really where it starts to pick up, and the cuts that you most likely won't know, because this is what has happened between really yesterday and today. So the New England Patriots started with releasing second-round cornerback Duke Dawson. Of course, he was traded to the Denver Broncos. I made an entire video on that, which you guys can go check out if you want to have all the details and my thoughts on that. Ultimately, I did not see that one coming. New England then goes and they release fullback/tight end Andrew Beck. Honestly, that wasn't much of a surprising move, but I wouldn't be surprised if he gets reverted back to their practice squad. The practice squad has not been released yet, though, but when it is, I will let you guys know what that is. Then they release Tyree St. Louis, Cedrick Lane, David Perry, wide receiver Ryan Davis, who is another guy I feel could be a practice squad candidate. That's just mostly because of his connection and past history with Jarrett Stidham. Offensive lineman, stay with me on this one, Tyler Gother. They also released linebacker Christian Sam, okay? And a lot of guys were commenting in my my comment section saying, what about Christian Sam? He can be a player that makes the roster. I never really saw it. He didn't really do much. So it doesn't really surprise me that Christian Sam got cut. He, of course, could be a possible candidate for them to look at to the practice squad, just trying to see what else they can get with him. But he's also had a lot of time with the team. This was his second offseason, and he still hasn't really showed any progression. New England also releases offensive lineman Martez Ivy and wide receiver Damon Patterson. So really, those list of guys were kind of just the guys that you would expect to get cut. If you're looking at all the players that they had on that 90-man roster, and you kind of go through and you're like, okay, who do I think is going to get cut? Really, everyone that I just listed, except for Duke Dawson, was probably going to be on your list. Now, today, the day I'm recording this, was the day that the Patriots had to make their final cuts by 4 p.m., and this is where it gets a little bit more crazy. So they started with releasing wide receiver Braxton Berrios, and ultimately you had to see that one coming after him getting injured and then not seeing him really play in the final preseason game versus the Giants, him not being active versus the Panthers game. You obviously knew that, all right, there's no way he's going to make this roster. If a team does not claim him, I do think that the Patriots will try to revert him back to the practice squad. But really, we'll just have to see if he does clear the waivers. Next up, they released tight end Steven Anderson. Wasn't too much of a surprise there. Next, defensive lineman Afumba Kamalu. He also got released. He was a guy that they signed last season. He got reverted from the practice squad onto the active roster around December. New England then releases tight end Eric Saubert. This is the guy that a couple weeks ago they traded with the Falcons. And it does suck because they did make a trade. Now, it was just a conditional 7th round pick. So really, you knew that there was no no liability that he was going to make this roster. New England then made a move that really upset a lot of people on Pats Nation, and that was releasing wide receiver / cornerback / punt returner Gunnar Olszewski. And that also confused me a little bit as they released Braxton Berrios right before, and just the questions for me started going up on being, okay, who the heck is going to return punts and kicks? But then later on, we find out that the Patriots actually called back Gunnar Olszewski and said, look, we know that we just told you you're going to get released, but we actually want you to come back and play on the team for this upcoming season. So you're getting a little bit of insight in on my next video now. I will say, though, with Gunnar Olszewski, the thing is that he got called back very late, and he originally was cut. So what I'm hearing is that he still could be a possible release candidate in case the Patriots do want to add some of the guys that have been released. Next up was an offensive lineman that a lot of people were high on this offseason. I definitely wasn't. And that was offensive tackle Dan Skipper. Was not a shock to me. He was having a pretty rough offseason. Did some good things, but definitely had a lot of inconsistency and issues. Definitely was not going to be a backup to Isaiah Wynn. If New England is somehow able to get him on that practice squad, I definitely think that would be a route they would love to take. The Patriots then release defensive lineman Nick Thurman. Then they released linebacker Scooby Wright. This was a linebacker that they very recently signed right before the Giants game, and I didn't really make a video on it strictly because I knew he was just going to get released. It was just a body to play in the final preseason game. He did good. All right, he did good in the final preseason game. Recorded 2 sacks for not being with the team very long. What I'm hearing is that he is also a practice squad candidate. Next up, the Patriots make a move that a lot of us were wondering, and that's the quarterback competition as they released veteran quarterback Brian Hoyer. Now, from what I can understand, there is some interest still with the Patriots bringing him back, and to me, that makes sense of why they want to bring him back. I don't necessarily 100% agree with it, but it does make sense on why they do want to bring him back. Something to really look out for, though, is that teams like the Broncos and the Lions do reportedly have interest in Brian Hoyer. Then the Patriots released linebacker Terez Hall. He's definitely a guy that I wouldn't be shocked if the Patriots threw on the practice squad if he clears waivers, which I would think he would. And that's really because the Patriots were high on Terez Hall this offseason. I know he didn't really do much, but for some reason, Bill Belichick and the coaching staff did like Terez Hall, and of course, because he just had one offseason with the team, it wouldn't be a surprising move. Next up, the New England Patriots make a very surprising move, and that is trading cornerback Keion Crossen to the Houston Texans. I made an entire video on this trade. Also, you can go check that out if you guys would like to. Very surprising move, but ultimately, this right here is the reason that Gunnar Olszewski got back on the team. When the Patriots released Keion Crossen, that is what for some reason opened up the spot for Gunnar Olszewski to come back on the team. I'm actually really going to miss Keion Crossen, but in the end, I wish nothing but the best for him, and he'll definitely get more opportunities down there with the Houston Texans than he would here with the New England. Next up, the Patriots cut running back Nick Brissett, and this, of course, is no shock. We knew that it was a super, super big launch shot for him to be making this team with such a crowded running back group. It's definitely someone who they could just slap on that practice squad just because they want to have a guy who's young, he's a rookie, develop a little bit more, and someone that, of course, knows the Patriots playbook and they've seen play a lot because he was the really main running back in the Patriots preseason, but he also is very slow, so I wouldn't be surprised if they didn't and they just straight up released him and his time with the Patriots is done. Now, the next move was hands down the biggest and most surprising move that the Patriots made. And this is releasing wide receiver Demaryius Thomas. The Patriots releasing Demaryius Thomas was a very confusing thing. I kind of thought at first it was a joke. He played super well in the first time that we saw him with the Patriots and coming back from an injury. The Patriots kept him the entire offseason. Even after he was dealing with all these injuries, he finally gets better and then they release him. From what reports have said, though, there is a lot of interest between Demaryius Thomas and the Patriots in bringing him back, and Demaryius Thomas definitely could have been one of those guys that the Patriots just release and plan on bringing back, but at the time, he just kind of had to be that odd man out in order for the rest of their 53-man roster to work and not lose the guys that they desperately felt that they needed on the team. And for example of this, they did this a lot with Brandon Bolden, except of course last year when they did this with Brandon Bolden, he actually ended up getting claimed by a team, so it didn't work out too well for them. I'm hearing a lot of reports say that they would be very shocked if Demaryius Thomas does not come back with the Patriots. Now, what I will say is that New England, if you are trying to bring back Demaryius Thomas, which for God's sake, please bring him back, then you must do it soon because my guy is going to get claimed at some point if you don't get him. New England could always have released him and looked to sign him back for a longer extension, or also look to bring him back for less money, or both. So next, the Patriots put some players on the injured reserve, and what this means is that because they put him on the injured reserve and they didn't originally make the 53-man roster, it means that their seasons are over. They may not return at all for this upcoming season. Actually, let's talk about three, because they made 3 of those moves in a row, and that is they put center David Andrews on the injured reserve, defensive end Derek Rivers on the injured reserve, and rookie offensive lineman Yelda Froholt on the injured reserve. So again, that means all 3 of them you will not see playing at all this season. They cannot come back halfway through the season. Their season is completely over, but they are still with the team, and they will be able to come back the following season. My biggest one here is probably Derek Rivers. I mean, my poor guy, 2 out of the 3 seasons he's with the team, he gets put on season-ending injured reserve. I mean, I definitely feel for the guy. Next up, the Patriots released rookie cornerback, Ken Webster. He's a 7th-round pick this past year. It makes total sense on why they released him. He really hasn't done anything. And really, it just kind of is what it is on this one. Then New England releases defensive end Trent Harris. They place Malik Gant on injured reserve. He was the guy that got carted off in our preseason finale versus the Giants, in case you're wondering who that is. So his season will be over, but he is under contract with the team as he is a rookie, so he will be able to come back next year and compete for a roster spot. Offensive lineman Yanni Kajust was placed on the non-football injury list. Center James Ferentz, he was also a guy that got released, which I'm okay with. I definitely was not high on James Ferentz. And then the team also releases offensive lineman Keion Crossen. Wouldn't be surprised if they revert him back to the practice squad at all. They always have him somewhere on the team. And then lastly, they released fullback Jakob Johnson, and he will be on the practice squad, actually. It's kind of part of this whole thing the NFL is doing with, like, guys from foreign countries or something like that. He will be a part of the Patriots practice squad and not actually take up a spot on their 10-player practice squad. So technically the Patriots will be able to have 11 players, but they will not be able to release Jakob Johnson and then add some other player to make 11. So if you were a Jakob Johnson fan, then hey, he is going to be on the practice squad at least. But that is it for today's video. Those are all the transactions that the Patriots have made to go from their 90 men to their final 53 men. Again, I will be making a video on what our 53-man roster is and all my thoughts on it. But that's it for today's video. Make sure you guys check out that video when it is out, and make sure you leave me your comments on what you think of all the transactions that I just discussed. Make sure you guys like and subscribe if you have not already. Make sure you guys share this video with everybody who else who can go to the Patriots Global family. And other than that, I will catch you guys in another video.